I thought offering my blood to save a dying infant was simply the right thing to do. I never expected it would awaken a primal instinct in the city's most ruthless billionaire, binding my fate to the terrifying Ice Queen. Welcome to the channel. If you are looking for heart-pounding romance, irresistible tension, and dramatic twists, you are exactly where you need to be. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below to let us know how much you love the story. Your support helps us bring you more amazing episodes. Now grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive right into the story. Part 1: The Golden Match. The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Medical Center buzzed with a frantic, suffocating energy. For 22-year-old Chloe Evans, this hospital was usually just a place to pay her bills. As a senior nursing student drowning in student loans, picking up double shifts as a phlebotomy tech wasn't a choice, it was a survival tactic. She was used to the chaos, the alarms, the scent of antiseptic, and the endless stream of patients. But tonight was different. Tonight, the entire 6th-floor pediatric ICU felt like a war zone waiting for a bomb to detonate. "She's going to fire the entire board of directors," whispered Sarah, another nurse, her eyes wide as she peered down the hallway. "I heard she already threatened to buy the hospital just to bulldoze it if they don't find a match." Chloe adjusted her scrubs, her brow furrowing. "Who are we talking about?" "Victoria Sterling," Sarah hissed, as if saying the name too loudly would summon the devil herself. Chloe's breath hitched. Everyone in the city, shifter or human, knew the name Victoria Sterling. She was the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, an untouchable titan of industry, and the most powerful alpha wolf on the East Coast. The media called her the Ice Queen. She was notoriously ruthless, fiercely private, and entirely devoid of warmth. She fired executives for a single typo and crushed rival packs without lifting a perfectly manicured finger. "What is she doing here?" Chloe asked, lowering her voice instinctively. "It's her baby," Dr. Harrison interrupted, stepping out of the elevator. The chief of pediatrics looked like he had aged 10 years in the last hour. He was sweating through his white coat. "The little girl, Lily. She's 6 months old and suffering from a severe, sudden onset of hemolytic anemia specific to their wolf lineage. Her red blood cells are destroying themselves. If we don't give her a transfusion of AB-negative, shifter-compatible blood in the next 3 hours, she won't make it." "Then get it from the blood bank," Chloe said, confused. "We have one of the best reserves in the state." "We checked," Dr. Harrison said, rubbing his temples. "Lily has a rare genetic marker. Ordinary human blood won't work, and standard shifter blood is rejecting. We ran a cross-match algorithm through the National Registry. We found exactly one perfect match within a 500-mile radius." Dr. Harrison stopped pacing and looked directly at Chloe. His eyes were desperate, pleading. "Me." Chloe pointed to her chest, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. "You, Chloe. You donated a pint 2 years ago during a campus drive. You have the golden blood type. The exact antibodies little Lily needs. But because you're an unawakened Omega, your file was restricted. I had to bypass protocol to even see your name." Chloe stood frozen. The shifter world was something she actively avoided. Being an unawakened Omega meant she possessed the genetics of a shifter, but her wolf had never surfaced. She didn't have a pack, didn't run in the moonlight, and certainly didn't mingle with elite alphas. She lived a quiet, human life. "Will you do it?" Dr. Harrison asked softly. "Miss Sterling is, well, she's losing her mind. But more importantly, an innocent child is going to die tonight if you say no." There wasn't a choice to make. Chloe didn't care about Victoria Sterling's billions or her terrifying reputation. She cared about a 6-month-old baby taking her next breath. "Set it up," Chloe said firmly, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's go." Minutes later, Chloe was lying on a crisp hospital bed in a sterile private donation suite. A thick needle was secured in the crook of her arm, dark red blood flowing steadily through the clear tubing into a collection bag. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room, grounding her. She closed her eyes, feeling a slight wave of dizziness wash over her. Taking a deep breath, she focused on the ceiling tiles, counting them to distract herself from the mild ache in her vein. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. It wasn't a draft. It was a heavy, suffocating pressure that made the hair on the back of Chloe's neck stand up. The air crackled with an intense, dominating aura. Before the heavy wooden door of the suite even opened, Chloe's dormant instincts flared to life, a deep, unrecognized part of her soul trembling in sudden submission. The door swung open, and the breath was knocked completely out of Chloe's lungs. Victoria Sterling stepped into the room. The photographs in the business magazines did not do her justice. Victoria was devastatingly beautiful and terrifyingly imposing. She stood well over 6 feet tall, dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit that clung to her athletic frame. Her raven hair was pulled back into a severe, flawless bun, but a few stray strands framed her sharp jawline, hinting at the chaos she was barely holding back. But it was her eyes that made Chloe freeze. They were a piercing, icy blue, swirling with a tempest of unspeakable grief, rage, and exhaustion. Victoria didn't look at Chloe. She looked at the blood bag filling up on the machine. Her chest heaved as she stepped closer, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. "Is this the donor?" Victoria's voice was like crushed velvet wrapped over steel, smooth, rich, but cold enough to freeze boiling water. Dr. Harrison, who had hurried in behind her, nodded frantically. "Yes, Ms. Sterling. This is Chloe Evans." She agreed immediately. "The blood is a perfect match for Lily. We will begin the transfusion in exactly 10 minutes. For the first time, Victoria turned her icy gaze away from the medical equipment and looked down at the young woman in the bed. Chloe braced herself, expecting the cold dismissal she knew billionaires gave to the working class. She expected a curt nod, maybe a blank check tossed on the table as a thank you. Instead, the moment Victoria's piercing blue eyes locked onto Chloe's warm hazel ones, the entire world seemed to stop spinning. A sharp, audible gasp escaped Victoria's lips. The terrifying, oppressive aura of the ruthless alpha suddenly fractured, shattering into a million pieces. Victoria stumbled half a step forward, her composure breaking completely. Chloe felt it too. A sudden intoxicating scent filled the room, like fresh pine, winter frost, and something distinctly, thrillingly dangerous. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but from a strange, magnetic pull that felt ancient and undeniable. Deep inside her chest, a phantom heartbeat echoed in rhythm with Victoria's. "You?" Victoria whispered, her voice stripped of all its ice, leaving behind a raw, breathless wonder. Victoria closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Dr. Harrison tried to step in, murmuring something about sterile protocols, but a low, dangerous growl ripped through Victoria's chest. It was a sound that commanded absolute obedience. The doctor instantly backed away, lowering his head. Victoria stood over Chloe's bed, her chest rising and falling heavily. The Alpha, known for tearing down corporate empires without blinking, was trembling. Slowly, almost reverently, Victoria reached out. Her long, cool fingers gently brushed against Chloe's cheek, tucking a stray lock of brown hair behind the young nurse's ear. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight down Chloe's spine. She shivered, her breath catching in her throat as she stared up into the eyes of the most dangerous woman in the city. "Mine," Victoria breathed, the word carrying the weight of a sacred vow. The icy blue of her eyes flashed with a brilliant, predatory gold. Chloe's mind spun. "Mine?" The word echoed in her head. She knew what that word meant in the shifter world. It was the claim of a mate. The ultimate, unbreakable bond. But that was impossible. She was just a broke student, a nobody, a human passing Omega who only wanted to help a sick baby. "Miss Sterling," Chloe managed to stammer, her voice shaking as she tried to pull back, but the foreline restricted her movement. "I'm just here to donate blood." Victoria's gaze softened, a fierce, protective warmth flooding her expression. a look no one in the world had ever seen the Ice Queen wear. She leaned down, her lips brushing just inches from Chloe's ear, sending a flurry of heat across Chloe's skin. "You are saving my daughter's life," Victoria murmured, her voice a low, possessive purr that vibrated straight through Chloe's core. "And in return, Chloe Evans, I am going to give you the world. You are never going back to your old life again." Before Chloe could process the sheer magnitude of the billionaire's words, the machine beeped loudly, signaling the bag was full. Victoria straightened up immediately, the golden flash in her eyes fading back to a protective, calculated blue. She looked at Dr. Harrison with a renewed, lethal authority. "Take the blood to my daughter. Save her," Victoria commanded. Then she looked back down at Chloe, a small, undeniable smirk playing on her lips. "I will be right here when you recover, little mate. We have a lot to discuss." As the doctors rushed out to save the infant, Chloe was left staring at the billionaire alpha who had just claimed her soul, realizing with a jolt of pure adrenaline that her quiet, invisible life was officially over. End of Part 1. Part 2. The sterile walls of the donation suite felt as though they were vibrating with an invisible electric current. Chloe lay flat on the hospital bed, a cotton ball taped to the crook of her arm, trying to process the sheer absurdity of the last 10 minutes. Her head spun, partially from the loss of a pint of blood, but mostly from the suffocating, intoxicating presence of the woman sitting beside her. Victoria Sterling hadn't moved an inch. The billionaire CEO had pulled up a plastic visitor's chair, treating it as if it were a throne, and simply watched Chloe. Her piercing, icy blue eyes traced every line of Chloe's face, taking in her exhausted pallor, her messy brown hair, and the cheap fabric of her nursing scrubs. Chloe felt like a mouse trapped under the paw of a very patient, very lethal lioness. "Stop looking at me like that," Chloe finally muttered, her voice raspy. She tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea forced her back against the pillows. Instantly, Victoria was on her feet. Her hands, cool and impossibly strong, gripped Chloe's shoulders, guiding her gently but firmly back down. The scent of fresh pine and winter frost washed over Chloe again, making her dormant omega instincts flare in a confusing mix of submission and deep, aching comfort. "Do not move," Victoria commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an alpha order, laced with a low, vibrating timbre that made the hair on Chloe's arms stand up. "You just gave a substantial amount of blood to save my child. Your body needs time to replenish. Lie still, little mate." Chloe's cheeks burned. "Stop calling me that. I'm not your little mate. I'm Chloe. I'm a nursing student who owes $60,000 in loans, and I have a pharmacology exam on Tuesday. I don't belong in whatever billionaire werewolf drama you have going on." A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of Victoria's perfectly sculpted lips. The Ice Queen, notorious for her lack of humor, looked utterly charmed by Chloe's defiance. "Your student loans are already paid off," Victoria stated casually, returning to her seat and crossing her long legs. "I sent a text to my financial team while you were resting. The debt is cleared. As for your exams, you won't need to work another day in your life unless it pleases you. You are mine now. The mate of the Sterling pack." Chloe's jaw dropped. She stared at the woman in absolute disbelief. You paid off my loans? Without asking me? You can't just buy my life." "I am not buying your life, Chloe," Victoria said, her tone suddenly softening, the icy blue of her eyes melting into something profoundly vulnerable. "I am protecting it. You are my fated mate. For 32 years, I thought I would walk this earth alone. I accepted it. I built an empire to fill the void. And then, the universe drops you into my lap in the exact moment my daughter is dying. Do you really think I'm ever going to let you walk out of that door and go back to a cramped apartment and double shifts?" Chloe swallowed hard, her heart doing a frantic, uncoordinated rhythm against her ribs. The sincerity in Victoria's voice was devastating. Stripped away the terrifying CEO persona and revealed the desperate, fiercely protective wolf beneath. Before Chloe could formulate a response to the mind-boggling revelation that she was suddenly debt-free, the heavy door to the suite swung open. Dr. Harrison walked in, his face flushed, looking like he had just run a marathon. But there was a wide, brilliant smile stretching across his exhausted features. Victoria stood up immediately, her posture rigid, the alpha aura snapping back into place like a steel trap. "Report." "She's stabilizing," Dr. Harrison said, his voice trembling with relief. "Miss Sterling, it's nothing short of a miracle." The moment Chloe's AB-negative blood entered Lily's system, the destruction of the red blood cells halted. Her color is coming back. Her heart rate has normalized. She's going to make a full recovery. The sound that escaped Victoria's lips was something Chloe had never expected to hear from the fearsome Ice Queen. It was a choked, breathless sob. Victoria closed her eyes, pressing her hand against her mouth as her broad shoulders trembled. For a brief, fleeting moment, the weight of the world fell off the alpha's shoulders. Chloe felt an unexpected pang in her own chest. Her omega instincts surged, urging her to comfort the distressed alpha. Without thinking, Chloe reached her hand out across the bed. Victoria opened her eyes, saw Chloe's extended hand, and took it without hesitation. The billionaire sank to her knees beside the hospital bed, pressing Chloe's small, warm hand against her cheek. She took a deep, shuddering breath, grounding herself in Chloe's scent. "Thank you," Victoria whispered, her voice rough with unshed tears. "You saved her. You saved my everything." "She's just a baby," Chloe murmured softly, her thumb brushing against Victoria's sharp cheekbone on its own accord. "I would have done it for anyone." "But you did it for us," Victoria replied, turning her head slightly to press a soft, lingering kiss to the center of Chloe's palm. The contact sent a jolt of fire straight to Chloe's core, making her gasp. Dr. Harrison awkwardly cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable intruding on such an intensely intimate moment. I will go monitor the baby's vitals. Let me know if the donor needs anything." He quickly backed out of the room, shutting the door tightly behind him. Victoria slowly rose to her feet, though she refused to let go of Chloe's hand. Her demeanor shifted again. The vulnerable, terrified mother was replaced by the calculating, ruthless CEO. Her eyes hardened into twin shards of glacial ice. "Now that my daughter is safe, we have a secondary problem to deal with," Victoria said smoothly, pulling a sleek black smartphone from her suit pocket. "Problem?" Chloe asked, finally sitting up, ignoring the slight dizziness. "Lily's illness," Victoria explained, her voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal register. Hemolytic anemia of that specific strain does not just suddenly appear in a healthy 6-month-old shifter pup. It is highly irregular. My security team intercepted a communication 30 minutes ago. Lily wasn't just sick, Chloe. She was poisoned. Chloe's blood ran cold. Poisoned? Who would do that to an infant? Rivals, Victoria spat the word with pure venom. The Blackwood pack has been trying to usurp my territory for years. They knew they couldn't touch me directly, so they targeted my heir. They used a rare genetic compound that mimics the disease, designed to slowly destroy her from the inside out. Victoria stepped closer, her tall frame looming over the bed. They calculated everything perfectly. They knew the blood banks wouldn't have a match. They expected her to die tonight, crippling me with grief. But they didn't account for a hidden, unregistered omega possessing the exact golden blood type needed to neutralize their poison. Chloe's breath hitched. "You're saying I ruined their plan?" "You shattered it," Victoria confirmed, her thumb stroking the back of Chloe's hand. And the moment that transfusion started, the hospital network updated its logs. The Blackwoods have eyes everywhere. By now, they know the baby survived. And they know exactly whose blood saved her. Panic finally clawed its way up Chloe's throat. She yanked her hand back, her eyes wide. "Wait, you're saying these psycho werewolves are going to come after me because I donated blood?" They will try, Victoria said calmly, though a deadly, predatory growl rumbled deep in her chest at the very thought. Which is why you are not returning to your apartment. You are coming home with me. To the Sterling estate. No, Chloe protested, pushing the blankets off her legs and swinging her feet over the edge of the bed. I can't just disappear. I have a life. I have a roommate. I have finals. Your roommate has been moved to a 5-star hotel under a fake name, courtesy of my security team, Victoria countered effortlessly. Your professors will receive medical deferment notices by morning. You are not safe out there, Chloe. You are an unawakened Omega, entirely defenseless against a coordinated Alpha attack. If the Blackwoods get their hands on you... Victoria stopped, her eyes flashing gold as her jaw clenched tight enough to crack stone. I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone touch a single hair on your head. Chloe stood up, her legs wobbling like jelly. You're crazy. You're all crazy. I'm calling an Uber. She took one step toward the door and immediately stumbled, the blood loss finally catching up to her. The room tilted violently. Before she could hit the floor, a blur of motion swept across the room. Strong, solid arms caught her effortlessly, pulling her flush against a firm, warm body. Chloe gasped, her face buried in the lapel of Victoria's expensive suit, surrounded entirely by the scent of pine and winter. Stubborn little mate, Victoria murmured, her voice a soothing rumble against Chloe's ear. With incredible ease, Victoria scooped Chloe up into her arms, carrying her bridal style as if she weighed absolutely nothing. Put me down, Chloe weakly protested, though her head naturally rested against Victoria's shoulder, her traitorous Omega instincts reveling in the feeling of being held by her Alpha. Not a chance, Victoria replied, walking toward the door. Just then, the door swung inward. A tall woman with a severe undercut, wearing a tactical suit and carrying a heavy duffel bag, stepped in. She took one look at Victoria carrying Chloe and froze, her dark eyes wide with shock. Morgan, Victoria said smoothly, not missing a beat. Is the transport ready? Morgan, Victoria's beta and head of security, blinked rapidly, clearly struggling to comprehend the sight of her notoriously cold Alpha holding a human girl like she was made of glass. Yes, boss. The armored SUV is out back. Perimeter is secured. The baby is already loaded in the transport incubator with Dr. Harrison. Excellent, Victoria said, shifting Chloe slightly higher in her arms. Tell the driver we are heading straight to the estate. And Morgan? Double the perimeter guard. If anyone from the Blackwood pack comes within a mile of our borders tonight, shoot to kill, Morgan finished with a sharp nod, her eyes darting to Chloe. Understood. As Victoria carried her out of the room and down the private VIP hallway, Chloe looked up at the billionaire's sharp profile. She was exhausted, terrified, and completely out of her depth. Her quiet, ordinary life was a burning bridge behind her, and ahead lay a mansion guarded by heavily armed werewolves, a dying-turned-surviving baby, and an ice queen who had just claimed Chloe as her very own. Chloe closed her eyes, finally letting the darkness of exhaustion pull her under, safely wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous woman in the world. End of Part 2. Part 3 Into the Wolf's Den. Chloe woke up to the sensation of floating on a cloud. For a few blissful seconds, her mind was beautifully blank. Then, the smell of fresh pine and winter frost hit her senses, sharp and invigorating, instantly unlocking the chaotic memories of the previous night. The hospital. The dying baby. Poisoned bloodline. And Victoria Sterling, the terrifying alpha billionaire who had claimed Chloe as her mate. Chloe's eyes snapped open. She shot up in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was no longer in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital suite. She was in a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. The walls were painted a deep, soothing midnight blue, adorned with classical oil paintings in gilded frames. Floor-to-ceiling windows were framed by heavy velvet curtains, currently pulled back to reveal a sprawling, manicured forest estate bathed in the golden light of early morning. She looked down at herself. The cheap, scratchy hospital scrubs were gone. Instead, she was wearing a set of black silk pajamas that felt like liquid against her skin. Panic flared in her chest. Who changed my clothes? Before her mind could spiral further, a soft knock echoed through the massive room. The heavy oak door pushed open just a crack, and a young woman wearing a crisp professional maid's uniform stepped inside. She kept her eyes respectfully lowered, holding a silver tray laden with fresh fruit, croissants, and steaming coffee. "Good morning, Luna," the maid said softly, setting the tray down on the marble bedside table. "Luna," Chloe repeated, her voice croaking slightly. My name is Chloe. And please, where am I?" The maid offered a small, polite smile. "You are at the Sterling estate, Miss Chloe. Alpha Sterling instructed me to bring you breakfast the moment your heart rate indicated you were waking. She also asked me to convey her apologies for changing your garments. She did not want your sleep disturbed by the hospital residue. Only I attended to you, I assure you." Chloe let out a long breath she didn't realize she was holding, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Where is she? Where's Victoria?" "The Alpha is in the nursery down the hall to your right," the maid replied, taking a step back toward the door. "She instructed that you are free to roam the private wing, but you must not go downstairs. The pack is on high alert." With a final bow, the maid slipped out, leaving Chloe alone with a breakfast that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Her stomach growled violently, reminding her of the blood she had lost. She grabbed a buttery croissant and practically inhaled it, washing it down with a sip of the richest coffee she had ever tasted. The food brought a rush of energy back into her limbs. Her mind cleared, and curiosity began to replace her fear. She swung her legs out of the massive, plush bed. The hardwood floor was heated beneath her bare feet. Taking a deep breath, Chloe walked out of the bedroom and into the wide, lavishly decorated hallway. The silence in the mansion was heavy, thick with an unspoken tension. Chloe padded quietly down the hall, turning to the right as the maid had instructed. Halfway down the corridor, a door was left ajar, a warm pool of amber light spilling out onto the Persian rug. As Chloe approached, she heard a sound that made her freeze in her tracks. It was a lullaby. The voice singing it was low, rich, and breathtakingly tender. Chloe peeked through the crack in the door, her breath catching in her throat. The nursery was a stunning display of wealth and warmth, filled with plush toys, a hand-carved mahogany crib, and a massive bay window overlooking the heavily guarded grounds. Sitting in a velvet rocking chair was the Ice Queen herself. Victoria Sterling was no longer wearing her imposing, tailored business suit. She wore a simple, dark gray cashmere sweater and comfortable slacks. Her raven hair, usually pulled back in a severe, flawless bun, tumbled down her shoulders in soft, chaotic waves. In her arms, wrapped in a pale pink blanket, was baby Lily. Victoria was gazing down at the infant with an expression of such profound, devastating love that Chloe felt an ache in her own chest. The ruthless CEO, the woman who supposedly destroyed rival packs without blinking, was gently stroking her baby's cheek, her icy blue eyes softened by tears of absolute gratitude. "You are so strong, my little wolf," Victoria murmured to the baby, pressing a soft kiss to Lily's forehead. "You fought so hard." Chloe's dormant omega instincts, which had been silent for her entire 22 years of life, suddenly roared to the surface. Looking at the powerful alpha protecting her vulnerable pup, a primal, overwhelming wave of warmth and submission washed over Chloe. Her inner wolf, deeply buried, practically purred at the sight. She shifted her weight, the floorboard beneath her foot letting out a microscopic creak. Victoria's head snapped up instantly. The soft, maternal glow in her eyes vanished, replaced in a fraction of a second by the lethal, predatory glare of a territorial alpha. But the moment those icy blue eyes locked onto Chloe standing in the doorway, the danger evaporated. "Chloe," Victoria breathed, her voice dropping to that possessive velvet rumble that sent shivers straight down Chloe's spine. "I'm sorry," Chloe whispered, stepping into the room awkwardly, suddenly very aware of her silk pajamas. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just..." I wanted to see if she was okay. Victoria stood up from the rocking chair, holding Lily securely against her chest. She crossed the room with a predatory grace that made Chloe's heart flutter uncontrollably. Victoria stopped mere inches away, her towering height casting a protective shadow over Chloe. The intoxicating scent of pine and frost wrapped around Chloe like a heavy, warm blanket. "You never have to apologize for entering a room in this house, little mate," Victoria said smoothly. "Everything that is mine is yours." Chloe's cheeks flushed a deep crimson. "You can't just keep saying things like that. We literally met last night. I don't know you." "Your mind doesn't know me," Victoria corrected, stepping even closer, invading Chloe's personal space until they were practically chest to chest. "But your soul does. Your wolf does. I can hear your heart racing, Chloe. I can smell the sweetness of your scent spiking. You feel the bond just as intensely as I do." Chloe opened her mouth to deny it, to tell the billionaire that she was delusional, but the words died in her throat. 'Cause Victoria was right. The magnetic pull between them was terrifyingly strong. Every cell in Chloe's body was screaming at her to lean forward, to bury her face in the crook of Victoria's neck and let the alpha claim her. Before Chloe could embarrass herself by actually doing it, a tiny cooing sound broke the tension. Lily shifted in Victoria's arms, her big, bright green eyes blinking up at Chloe. The baby reached a chubby little hand out from the blanket, making a soft, demanding noise. Chloe gasped softly, her hazel eyes widening. She looks so much better. Her color is completely back." "Thanks to you," Victoria said softly, her gaze shifting between Chloe and her daughter. "Would you like to hold her?" Chloe hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you sure? I'm just—" "You are the reason she is breathing," Victoria interrupted firmly, leaving no room for argument. Carefully, gently, Victoria transferred the baby into Chloe's arms. The moment Chloe held the infant, an inexplicable surge of protectiveness exploded in her chest. Lily was surprisingly heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of baby powder and sweet milk. The little girl stared at Chloe with wide, curious eyes, then let out a happy gurgle, tiny fingers wrapping securely around a strand of Chloe's brown hair. A brilliant, breathtaking smile broke across Chloe's face. For a moment, she forgot about the billionaire, the rival packs, and the fact that she had essentially been kidnapped into a life of unimaginable wealth. She was just a girl holding a miracle she had helped save. Victoria stood perfectly still, watching the scene unfold with an intensity that could melt glaciers. The sight of her fated mate holding her child struck the alpha with the force of a physical blow. A low, rumbling purr vibrated in Victoria's chest, a sound of absolute, unparalleled contentment. "You look perfect holding her," Victoria whispered, reaching out to gently trace her knuckles down Chloe's cheek. The touch was so soft it felt like a ghost, yet it burned like fire. "You belong exactly here." The tender moment was violently shattered by the sound of the nursery door slamming open. Chloe jumped, clutching Lily closer to her chest as she spun around. Morgan, the terrifying head of security, stood in the doorway. Her tactical gear was covered in dirt and what looked suspiciously like blood. Her expression was grim. "Alpha," Morgan barked, ignoring Chloe entirely. "We have a massive problem." Victoria's demeanor changed so fast it gave Chloe whiplash. The loving mother and tender mate vanished completely. In her place stood the alpha of the Sterling pack, a merciless, calculating warlord. Her icy blue eyes flashed a blinding, dangerous gold, and the air in the room grew instantly heavy and suffocating. "Report," Victoria commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. "The Blackwoods," Morgan said, breathing heavily. "They didn't just test the perimeter. They brought a mercenary unit. They hit the eastern border heavily armed with silver-laced artillery. They're demanding the Omega." Chloe's blood turned to ice. "They are demanding me." Morgan looked at Victoria with grim certainty. "They know her blood is the cure to their poison. If they get her, they can ensure no one else survives their next attack. They won't leave without her, boss. And we are outnumbered 3-1. Victoria slowly turned to look at Chloe, who was trembling, clutching the baby tightly. The Alpha's golden eyes swept over Chloe's terrified face, and a low, earth-shaking growl ripped through Victoria's throat. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated violence. Take Lily. Take Chloe. Lock them in the underground vault, Victoria ordered Morgan, her tone devoid of all emotion, a terrifying calm before the storm. Activate the lockdown protocols. No one gets in or out. Victoria, what are you going to do? Chloe asked, her voice cracking in fear. Victoria stepped forward, pressing a fierce, urgent kiss to Chloe's forehead, lingering for just a second to inhale her scent one last time. I am going to remind the Blackwood pack why they call me the Ice Queen, Victoria whispered darkly, her golden eyes practically glowing with lethal intent. I am going to slaughter every single one of them who dared to step on my land and ask for what is mine. Without another word, Victoria turned on her heel and strode out of the nursery, leaving a terrified Chloe in the hands of her beta, while the sounds of distant alarms began to echo through the massive estate. End of Part 3. Part 4, The Obsidian Vault. The piercing shriek of the estate's security alarm shattered the morning calm, a violent contrast to the tender moment Chloe had just shared with the baby. The sound was deafening, a relentless, mechanical wail that sent a spike of pure adrenaline straight into Chloe's bloodstream. Red emergency lights began to strobe in the hallway outside the nursery, painting the elegant walls in jagged flashes of crimson. Move! Now, Morgan barked, her voice cutting through the chaos with practiced, military precision. She didn't wait for Chloe to process the command. The beta stepped forward, placing a heavy, reassuring hand on the small of Chloe's back, physically guiding her toward the hidden panels at the far end of the room. Chloe clutched Lily tighter to her chest, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. The baby, remarkably, didn't cry. Instead, Lily buried her tiny face into the soft silk of Chloe's pajamas, instinctively seeking the warmth and calming scent of the Omega holding her. Where are we going? Chloe gasped, struggling to keep up with Morgan's long, urgent strides. What about Victoria? She can't fight an entire mercenary unit by herself. They have silver. Morgan pushed a concealed button behind a bookshelf, and a section of the heavy oak wall slid silently open, revealing a stark, steel-reinforced elevator. Get in, Morgan ordered, ushering Chloe inside before pressing her thumb to a biometric scanner. The doors hissed shut, plunging them into a quiet, descending hum that temporarily blocked out the blaring alarms. Morgan finally turned to look at Chloe, a grim, humorless smirk playing on her lips. Miss Chloe, with all due respect, you have no idea who you are mated to. Victoria Sterling didn't become the alpha of the most powerful pack on the eastern seaboard by playing nice. They call her the Ice Queen because she leaves nothing but frozen corpses in her wake. The Blackwoods didn't just bring silver to our doorstep, they brought their own death warrants. Despite Morgan's terrifying confidence, Chloe's stomach tied itself into agonizing knots. Her mind logically knew that Victoria was a billionaire warlord, a creature of unimaginable power. But her deeply buried Omega instincts were screaming in distress. The mate bond, new, raw, and undeniable, tugged painfully at her chest. She could feel a phantom echo of Victoria's rage vibrating in her own veins, a terrifyingly intoxicating mix of bloodlust and desperate protectiveness. She went out there for me, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling as she looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms. They want me because of my blood. I'm putting all of you in danger. Morgan's expression softened, the hard edges of the hardened security chief melting slightly as she looked at the young, unawakened Omega. You saved the heir to the Sterling pack. You saved our alpha from a grief that would have destroyed us all. You aren't putting us in danger, Chloe. You are the heart we didn't know we were missing. Anyone who tries to touch you will have to go through an army of wolves who owe you everything. The elevator shuddered slightly as it hit the bottom floor, the doors parting to reveal a massive underground bunker. But it wasn't the cold, concrete cellar Chloe had imagined. It was an obsidian vault, heavily fortified with titanium walls but furnished like a high-end luxury penthouse. There were plush leather sofas, a fully stocked kitchen, a state-of-the-art medical bay, and a lavish crib waiting in the center of the room. "Welcome to the safe room," Morgan said, stepping out and gesturing for Chloe to follow. "The walls are 4 feet thick, lined with silver and lead. Can withstand a localized nuclear blast, and more importantly, it completely masks our scents. They won't be able to track you down here." Chloe walked into the room, her bare feet sinking into the thick plush carpet. She gently laid Lily down in the center of the massive, silk-lined crib, carefully tucking the pink blanket around the sleeping infant. The moment her arms were empty, the reality of the situation crashed down upon her. Her knees buckled, the exhaustion of the blood donation and the sheer terror of the morning finally taking their toll. Before she could hit the ground, Morgan was there, catching her by the elbow and easing her down onto one of the leather sofas. "Breathe, Omega," Morgan commanded gently, handing her a bottle of water from a nearby mini-fridge. "Drink. You're still recovering." "How long do we have to stay down here?" Chloe asked, taking a shaky sip of the cold water, her hazel eyes darting nervously toward the heavy titanium doors. "Until the Alpha gives the all-clear," Morgan replied, checking the glowing screen of her tactical watch. "Which shouldn't be long. The perimeter sensors indicate that the Blackwood forces have breached the outer gates. The fighting has begun." The next hour was the longest, most agonizing period of Chloe's entire life. Despite the incredible soundproofing of the vault, Chloe could feel the deep, rhythmic tremors vibrating through the floorboards. Every distant, muffled thud felt like a physical blow to her chest. She paced the length of the room, her silk pajamas whispering against her skin, her mind conjuring horrific images of Victoria surrounded by silver weapons, bleeding, falling. Every time her panic threatened to consume her, the mate bond flared to life. It was a strange, invisible tether anchored deep within her soul, pulsing with Victoria's dominating, furious energy. As long as she could feel that heavy, commanding presence in her mind, she knew Victoria was still alive. Still fighting. Still protecting them. Suddenly, the vibrations stopped. The heavy, oppressive silence that followed was infinitely worse than the sounds of battle. Chloe froze in the center of the room, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at Morgan, whose hand instinctively dropped to the heavy silver-plated firearm strapped to her thigh. "Morgan," Chloe whispered, terror lacing her voice. "What happened? Why did it stop?" Morgan didn't answer. Her dark eyes were locked onto the massive vault door. The indicator light above the locking mechanism, which had been glowing a steady, reassuring crimson, suddenly flashed green. The heavy, mechanical gears within the door began to groan and turn. Chloe backed away, her heart leaping into her throat. She positioned herself between the opening door and Lily's crib, her dormant Omega instincts flaring into a fierce, protective barrier. She had no claws, no fangs, no combat training, but she would die before she let a single mercenary touch that baby. The massive titanium door swung open with a heavy hiss of depressurization. A figure stepped through the threshold, and the air in the room instantly plummeted in temperature, saturated with the overwhelming scent of pine, winter frost, and the sharp metallic tang of copper blood. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Victoria stood in the doorway. The flawless, untouched billionaire CEO was gone. In her place was an apex predator. Her dark gray cashmere sweater was torn to shreds, exposing the pale, flawless skin beneath. Her knuckles were bruised and coated in dark crimson blood, none of it her own. Her raven hair was wild, plastered to her forehead with sweat, and her eyes were glowing a brilliant, terrifying, unearthly gold. She looked feral. Lethal. Utterly terrifying. Morgan immediately dropped to one knee, bowing her head in absolute submission to her victorious alpha. Victoria ignored her beta completely. Her glowing golden eyes locked onto Chloe, who was standing frozen by the crib. The heavy, suffocating aura of the ruthless warlord filled the room, making it hard to breathe. Victoria took a slow, deliberate step forward, her gaze intense, sweeping over every inch of Chloe to ensure she was unharmed. For a split second, Chloe felt a spike of genuine human fear. The woman standing before her was a monster, a creature capable of tearing grown men apart with her bare hands. But then the mate bond hummed to life. Beneath the terrifying, blood-soaked exterior, Chloe felt Victoria's desperate, agonizing need. She felt the alpha's exhaustion, her profound relief, and her singular, consuming devotion. Her inner wolf recognized its other half. Without thinking, casting aside all logic and fear, Chloe ran to her. She crossed the room in 3 frantic strides and threw herself into Victoria's arms. The impact forced a heavy, breathless grunt from the alpha. Instantly, Victoria's massive, powerful arms wrapped around Chloe's waist, pulling the smaller woman flush against her chest, lifting her toes entirely off the floor. Victoria buried her face in the crook of Chloe's neck, inhaling deeply. The moment the alpha breathed in the sweet, comforting scent of her mate, the terrifying golden glow in her eyes shattered, melting back into a soft, vulnerable icy blue. The feral beast receded, leaving behind a woman who was desperately clinging to her anchor. "You're safe," Victoria choked out, her voice a rough, broken rumble against Chloe's skin. "I've got you. They are gone. They will never touch you." Chloe wrapped her arms tightly around Victoria's neck, ignoring the blood and the dirt, entirely overwhelmed by the feeling of being held so fiercely. She threaded her fingers through Victoria's tangled raven hair, gently stroking the back of the alpha's neck, exactly the way her instincts told her an alpha needed to be calmed after a battle. "I'm here," Chloe whispered back, tears of relief finally spilling over her lashes, soaking into the ruined fabric of Victoria's sweater. "I'm right here. You came back to me." "I will always come back to you," Victoria swore, pulling back just enough to look down into Chloe's hazel eyes. The alpha's gaze was burning with an intensity that made Chloe's breath hitch. Victoria reached up, her blood-stained thumb gently wiping a tear from Chloe's cheek, careful not to smudge her with the dirt of the battle. "No one takes what is mine. No one." The raw possessiveness in Victoria's voice wasn't a threat, it was a promise. A terrifying, beautiful vow that bound Chloe's fate to the Ice Queen forever. Chloe looked up at the stunning, powerful woman holding her, realizing with absolute certainty that her old life was not just gone, it was utterly meaningless compared to the electric, soul-deep connection she felt right now. She was no longer just a struggling nursing student. She was the Luna of the Sterling Pack. Victoria leaned down, her forehead resting gently against Chloe's, their breaths mingling in the quiet space of the vault. For a long moment there was no war, no rival packs, no billionaire empires. There was only the Alpha, the Omega, and the unbreakable bond that had just been forged in blood and fire. "Come upstairs, my beautiful mate," Victoria murmured, her lips brushing softly against the shell of Chloe's ear, sending a wildfire of heat straight to her core. "Let me show you your real home." End of Part 4. Part 5, The Alpha's Anchor. The ride back up the hidden elevator was agonizingly slow, a stark contrast to the frantic descent that had felt like plummeting into the abyss. The mechanical hum of the reinforced steel cage was the only sound breaking the heavy, suffocated silence. Chloe stood frozen in the center of the car, cradling the sleeping infant against her chest. Her other hand, small and trembling slightly, was completely engulfed in Victoria's firm, blood-stained grasp. The billionaire warlord refused to let her go, her thumb rhythmically stroking the back of Chloe's knuckles, silently grounding them both. When the elevator doors finally hissed open, revealing the hidden panel behind the nursery bookshelf, the sharp scent of smoke, ozone, and copper flooded Chloe's senses. She gasped, taking an involuntary step back. "Close your eyes, little mate," Victoria murmured, her voice rough, stepping smoothly in front of Chloe to block her view. "You don't need to see this." "I'm fine," Chloe lied, her voice shaking as she peered around Victoria's broad shoulder. She immediately regretted it. The once pristine, lavishly decorated hallway of the Sterling estate was unrecognizable. The antique oil paintings had been shredded by what looked like massive claw marks. The expensive Persian rugs were soaked in dark, viscous puddles. A massive silver lace spear was embedded deep into the mahogany wall, still humming with residual kinetic energy. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, Chloe could see the eastern lawn. The manicured gardens were torn to pieces, cratered and scorched. Several dozen figures clad in black tactical gear were being dragged away by Victoria's security detail. The Blackwoods hadn't just breached the perimeter, they had brought a small war to the doorstep. And judging by the fact that the Sterling Pack members were the only ones still standing, Victoria had absolutely decimated them. Morgan appeared at the end of the hall, her tactical gear still smeared with ash and dirt. She jogged over, instantly bowing her head the moment she was within 5 feet of her alpha. "Boss," Morgan reported, her chest heaving but a feral, victorious grin plastered across her face. "The perimeter is fully secured. 32 Blackwood mercenaries neutralized. Not a single casualty on our side, just a few minor silver burns. They severely underestimated your speed, Alpha." Victoria's posture remained rigid, her golden eyes scanning the hallway for any lingering threats before she gave a sharp nod. "Burn their bodies at the border. Let the smoke drift into Blackwood territory so they understand exactly what happens when they threaten my family. Then lock down the estate. Nobody enters or leaves without my direct authorization." "Yes, Alpha," Morgan said. Then the hardened Beta did something that shocked Chloe to her core. Morgan shifted her gaze to Chloe, dropped to one knee amidst the wreckage, and bowed her head completely. "Luna, the pack stands at your command." Chloe's breath hitched. She instinctively squeezed Victoria's hand, completely overwhelmed by the display of absolute reverence from a woman who, just hours ago, had looked at her like a civilian liability. "Rise, Morgan," Victoria commanded softly, sensing Chloe's overwhelming anxiety. The Alpha gently guided Chloe down the hall, away from the destruction. "My mate needs rest. Have a specialized detail guard the master wing." Victoria led Chloe past the ruined corridors and pushed open a set of massive, reinforced double doors at the far end of the estate. They stepped into the master suite, a cavernous, stunning room that had somehow survived the chaos untouched. Smelled heavily of Victoria, fresh pine, winter frost, and old books. The moment the heavy doors clicked shut, locking the world outside, the terrifying aura of the warlord vanished. Victoria let out a long, shuddering sigh. The Alpha's broad shoulders slumped, and she leaned heavily against the doorway. The adrenaline that had fueled her through the slaughter was finally evaporating, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. She looked down at her ruined cashmere sweater, her hands covered in the dried blood of her enemies. "I am a mess," Victoria whispered, her icy blue eyes avoiding Chloe's gaze for the first time. A flicker of deep-seated insecurity crossed the billionaire's face. "I shouldn't have touched you like this. I shouldn't have brought this violence to you." Chloe carefully walked over to the massive, plush king-sized bed and gently laid Lily down in the center, surrounding the sleeping infant with a fortress of soft pillows. Then, she turned back to the most terrifying woman on the eastern seaboard. Chloe didn't see a monster. She didn't see an ice queen or a warlord. She saw a mother who had literally torn a mercenary army to shreds to protect her child. She saw a woman who had spent 32 years completely alone, building an empire out of ice because she had no warmth to come home to. Without a word of hesitation, Chloe crossed the room. She reached out, her small hands gently grasping the hem of Victoria's shredded sweater. Victoria flinched slightly, a low rumble of warning vibrating in her chest. "Chloe, don't. The blood is not yours," Chloe interrupted, her voice suddenly steady, infused with a quiet, undeniable strength that shocked even her. "You fought for us. Let me take care of you." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Her icy blue eyes widened as Chloe carefully, meticulously peeled the ruined sweater off the Alpha's shoulders, letting the blood-soaked fabric fall to the floor. Beneath the clothes, Victoria's athletic torso was a canvas of battle. Along with a few fresh, sizzling burns from the silver weapons, Her skin was marked with a network of old, faded scars, souvenirs from a lifetime of defending her throne. Chloe didn't gasp. She didn't pull away. Instead, she gently traced the line of a particularly jagged scar across Victoria's ribs, her touch impossibly tender. "Come with me," Chloe whispered softly. She took Victoria by the hand and led the dazed Alpha into the sprawling master en-suite bathroom. It was larger than Chloe's old apartment, constructed entirely of dark marble, featuring a massive sunken tub and a rainfall shower. Chloe turned on the brass faucets, adjusting the temperature until the water was a perfect, soothing warmth. "Sit," Chloe instructed gently, pointing to the marble bench inside the expansive glass shower enclosure. Victoria obeyed silently, her eyes never leaving Chloe's face. The billionaire looked completely mesmerized, as if she were watching a miracle unfold right in front of her. Chloe grabbed a thick, soapy sponge and stepped slightly into the enclosure, careful not to soak her silk pajamas. She began to wash the Alpha. She started with Victoria's hands, gently scrubbing the dried crimson from her bruised knuckles. She moved up the Alpha's strong arms, washing away the dirt, the ash, and the remnants of the war. As the warm water cascaded over Victoria's shoulders, washing the blood down the drain, the tense, rigid muscles of the warlord finally began to relax. Victoria let her head fall back against the marble wall, a soft, content sigh escaping her lips. 4 years, Victoria murmured, her eyes closed, her voice echoing softly over the sound of the running water. "They called me the Ice Queen because I felt nothing. No fear, no pity, no warmth. I thought my wolf was broken. I thought I was incapable of love." Chloe stopped scrubbing. She looked down at the breathtaking woman before her. "And now?" Victoria opened her eyes. The icy blue had melted entirely, replaced by a gaze so fiercely passionate, so deeply devoted, that it made Chloe's knees weak. Victoria reached out, her wet hand wrapping gently around Chloe's waist, pulling the Omega closer. "Now," Victoria whispered, her thumb tracing the curve of Chloe's hip. "I feel everything. I feel your heartbeat. I feel your breath. You thawed the ice, Chloe. You are my fire." The words sent a violent electric shock straight through Chloe's chest. It wasn't a metaphor. A literal wave of blistering heat suddenly erupted from the very core of Chloe's being. The sponge dropped from her hands, clattering against the marble floor. She gasped, her hands flying to her chest as her heart began to beat at a frantic, terrifying rhythm. "Chloe!" Victoria was instantly on her feet, the water forgotten. Her hands gripped Chloe's shoulders, her alpha instincts flaring in alarm. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" I don't know," Chloe stammered, squeezing her eyes shut. The world was spinning, but not from exhaustion. It was an overload of sensory input. Suddenly, the bathroom smelled infinitely more complex. She could smell the exact mineral composition of the water. She could smell the adrenaline still lingering in Victoria's sweat. Through the thick, soundproof walls of the master suite, she could hear the rhythmic footsteps of the guards patrolling the hallway outside. Her dormant genes, suppressed for 22 years, were finally awakening. Proximity to her fated mate, combined with the intense emotional bond they had just cemented, was ripping the locks off her soul. A deep, primal whine tore from Chloe's throat, a sound she didn't know she was capable of making. It wasn't a human sound. It was the desperate cry of a wolf breaking free. "Look at me," Victoria commanded, her voice lacing with alpha authority, yet vibrating with an undercurrent of absolute awe. "Chloe, open your eyes. Let me see you." Chloe forced her heavy eyelids open, panting for breath. She looked up into Victoria's stunned face, and then her gaze drifted to the massive, steam-covered mirror on the adjacent wall. Chloe froze. In the reflection, she saw Victoria standing behind her, tall, protective, and glowing with a faint golden alpha aura. But it was her own reflection that made Chloe's breath stop completely. Unawakened Omegas usually manifested with soft blue or violet eyes when their wolves finally surfaced. But the eyes staring back at Chloe in the mirror were not blue. They were not violet. They were a blinding, luminescent, pure silver. Victoria stumbled back half a step, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. The billionaire warlord, the woman who had just slaughtered an army without blinking, looked utterly terrified and completely astounded. "By the goddess," Victoria breathed, her voice barely a whisper, dropping to her knees in front of Chloe in an involuntary display of absolute reverence. You aren't just an Omega." Chloe stared down at her mate, her silver eyes glowing brightly in the dim light of the bathroom, her entire body vibrating with ancient, untamed power. "Victoria, what is happening to me?" Victoria looked up, her expression a mix of terrifying realization and desperate, consuming love. "You possess the royal silver," Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. "The bloodline of the first Luna. A lineage that was supposed to be extinct for 1,000 years. The Blackwoods didn't just attack to kill my daughter, Chloe. They attacked because if the High Shifter Council finds out you exist, they will burn the entire world down to take you from me." End of Part 5. Part 6, The Silver Luna. The master ensuite bathroom suddenly felt incredibly small, the air sucked entirely out of the room. The warm water continued to pour from the rainfall showerhead, cascading over Victoria's scarred, muscular shoulders, but neither woman noticed it. The only light that seemed to matter in the dark marble space was the ethereal, blinding silver luminescence radiating from Chloe's eyes. "The first Luna," Chloe repeated, her voice trembling, feeling like it belonged to someone else. It sounded richer, echoing with a strange, harmonic resonance that vibrated off the marble walls. "Victoria, I don't know what that means. I'm just a nursing student. I'm just Chloe." "You are so much more than that," Victoria whispered, still on her knees, the icy blue of her eyes wide with a mixture of absolute terror and undeniable reverence. The ruthless warlord, who bowed to no one, reached out with shaking, wet hands to gently grip Chloe's waist. 1,000 years ago, before the Pax divided into territories, there was one ruling bloodline. The Royal Omegas. They didn't just carry pups, Chloe. They were the anchors of the earth. Their blood could heal any wound, cure any poison, and their mere presence could bring a feral, blood-crazed alpha back to sanity in seconds. Chloe clutched the edge of the marble counter, her knuckles turning white. The sensory overload was agonizing. The smell of the expensive soap, the metallic tang of the plumbing, the incredibly potent, overwhelming scent of Victoria's winter pine and raw fear, it was all crashing into her brain like a physical wave. Her newly awakened wolf was thrashing beneath her skin, desperate, confused, and powerful. "Make it stop," Chloe gasped, squeezing her silver eyes shut as a sharp spike of pain shot through her temples. "Victoria, please. Everything is too loud. It's too much." Instantly, the alpha was on her feet. The terror in Victoria's eyes was shoved down, replaced by the fierce, protective instincts of a mate. She stepped out of the shower, grabbing a massive, plush towel and wrapping it tightly around Chloe's trembling shoulders, ignoring her own wet, bare skin. "Focus on me," Victoria commanded, her voice dropping into a low, rumbling purr that resonated deep within Chloe's chest. It was an alpha command, but laced with such profound tenderness that it bypassed Chloe's panic entirely. "Only me, little mate. Filter everything else out. Listen to my heartbeat." Victoria pulled Chloe flush against her chest. Despite being soaking wet, the alpha skin was radiating a furnace-like heat. Chloe buried her face into the crook of Victoria's neck, right over the warlord's scent gland. She took a deep, shuddering breath, filling her lungs entirely with the scent of pine and frost. Slowly, the chaotic noise of the world began to fade. Crushing weight of the new senses dialed back to a manageable hum. Chloe focused all her energy on the heavy, steady thump-thump of Victoria's heart against her own ribs. "That's it," Victoria murmured, her lips brushing against the crown of Chloe's head. "I've got you. I am your shield, Chloe. Nothing will touch you." With effortless strength, Victoria scooped Chloe up into her arms, carrying her out of the bathroom and back into the cavernous master bedroom. The alpha gently deposited Chloe onto the edge of the massive king-sized bed, right next to the fortress of pillows where little Lily was still fast asleep, completely oblivious to the earth-shattering revelations happening just feet away. Victoria turned away for just a moment, quickly pulling a fresh, dark gray t-shirt and dry sweatpants from a massive oak dresser. She dressed with military efficiency, her muscles rippling under the dim light of the bedroom lamps. Chloe sat on the bed, clutching the towel around her silk pajamas. She cautiously opened her eyes. The blinding silver glow had dimmed slightly, but the luminescent ring around her irises remained, a stark, undeniable proof of her terrifying heritage. "Why did the Blackwoods attack?" Chloe asked, her voice steadier now, the royal Omega blood beginning to rapidly heal her physical exhaustion. "If I'm this myth, why did they try to poison your baby?" Victoria walked back over, taking a seat on the edge of the mattress next to Chloe. She reached out, gently threading her fingers through Chloe's damp brown hair. "They didn't know you existed," Victoria explained, her jaw clenching, her eyes flashing a dangerous gold for a fraction of a second. "The Blackwoods used a synthetic genetic poison. It was designed to slowly kill Lily, knowing I wouldn't be able to find a cure. Their goal was to break my mind, to force me into a feral grief so the High Shifter Council would deem me unfit to rule the East Coast." Victoria's gaze dropped to the sleeping baby, an expression of profound, agonizing guilt crossing her sharp features. "If an alpha goes feral, their territory is forfeited. The Blackwoods wanted my empire. But they didn't anticipate the hospital bypass protocols finding a match. When your blood entered Lily's system, it didn't just neutralize the poison, Chloe. The royal silver bloodline eradicated it instantly. The hospital machines logged the miraculous recovery. The Blackwoods have spies in the medical network. When they saw the anomaly, they realized what had happened. They realized I was a royal Omega," Chloe finished, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. "Yes," Victoria said softly, her thumb stroking Chloe's cheek. "And a royal Omega is the ultimate prize. If an alpha mates with a royal, their strength is magnified tenfold. Their pack becomes practically invincible. If the Blackwoods captured you, they would have used you to breed a new dynasty of warlords. You would have been a prisoner for the rest of your life." A sickening shudder ripped through Chloe's body. The thought of being touched by anyone other than Victoria, of being locked away and used as a genetic breeding machine, made her newly awakened wolf snarl in vicious, primal disgust. Sensing her mate's distress, Victoria leaned in, pressing her forehead against Chloe's. "Listen to me," Victoria whispered, her voice a deadly, unbreakable vow. "I will slaughter every alpha on this continent before I let them lay a single finger on you. You are my mate. You are my Luna. You belong here with me and with our daughter. Our daughter." The words hit Chloe with the force of a freight train. She looked down at the tiny, sleeping infant. Just 24 hours ago, Chloe was agonizing over her pharmacology exams and how she was going to pay rent. Now she was the legendary anchor to a warlord billionaire, an adopted mother to a miraculous baby, and the most hunted creature in the shifter world. She should have been terrified. She should have run. But as she looked into Victoria's icy blue eyes, eyes that held nothing but absolute unconditional devotion, Chloe felt a profound, unshakable sense of rightness. "I'm not running," Chloe said softly, her silver eyes glowing slightly brighter as her inner wolf stepped up to accept her alpha. "I'm staying right here, Victoria. With you." A breath hitched in Victoria's throat. A single tear escaped the Ice Queen's eye, rolling down her sharp cheekbone. She leaned in, capturing Chloe's lips in a kiss that was so intensely passionate, so desperate, that it felt like a branding iron to Chloe's soul. The taste of winter frost and adrenaline exploded on Chloe's tongue. She wrapped her arms around Victoria's neck, pulling the larger woman closer, melting into the overwhelming heat of her mate. But the tender, defining moment was violently shattered. The heavy, reinforced double doors of the master suite chimed loudly. The electronic lock flashed red, and Morgan's voice came through the intercom system, laced with a level of panic Chloe hadn't heard from the beta during the entire mercenary attack. "Alpha, Forgive the intrusion, but you need to come down to the war room immediately. Victoria pulled back from the kiss, her eyes instantly hardening back into the lethal, calculating warlord. She pressed a quick, apologetic kiss to Chloe's forehead before hitting the intercom button on the bedside table. Report, Morgan. Is it another Blackwood assault? No, boss. Morgan's voice crackled through the speaker, tight and strained. It's worse. Much worse. The High Shifter Council just bypassed our encrypted comms. They detected the massive surge of silver weaponry at our borders. They know a battle took place. Victoria's posture went rigid. And they are sending an Inquisitor, Morgan replied. He just landed at the private airstrip 10 miles from the estate. He's demanding entry to inspect the premises and review the casualties. Damn it, Victoria hissed, slamming her fist onto the mahogany bedside table, splintering the wood instantly. Victoria, what does this mean? Chloe asked, pulling the towel tighter around herself, her heart racing. The council is the governing body of all pacts, Victoria explained quickly, pacing the floor, her mind running 1,000 miles a minute. They maintain the laws. If an Inquisitor finds out I slaughtered 32 mercenaries on my own soil, they will claim it was a disproportionate use of force. But worse, if they walk into this house and smell you. Victoria stopped pacing and looked directly at Chloe. Her gaze dropped to Chloe's luminescent silver eyes. If an Inquisitor sees your eyes, Chloe, he will immediately alert the council. They will declare you an artifact of the state. They will order my execution for hiding you, and they will take you to the capital. Panic seized Chloe's throat. Then I have to hide. Put me back in the vault. The vault masks sense from the outside, but an Inquisitor has the authority to search every inch of a warlord's estate, Victoria said, rubbing her temples. If he finds you locked in a titanium bunker, it will only prove I'm hiding something critical. And I cannot risk a physical confrontation with an Inquisitor. If I kill him, I declare war on the entire Shifter Council. I have the forces to fight one pack, Chloe. I do not have the forces to fight the entire world. Then what do we do? Chloe's voice cracked. Victoria took a deep breath, her golden alpha aura flaring brightly as she formulated a desperate plan. She walked over to the dresser, pulling out a sleek black velvet box. She opened it to reveal a pair of dark, heavily polarized designer sunglasses. She walked back to the bed and gently slid the glasses onto Chloe's face, effectively masking the terrifying silver glow of her eyes. You are going to play a role, Victoria said, her voice dead serious. The Inquisitor knows I went to the hospital last night to find a donor for Lily. We are going to tell him the truth, but only a fraction of it. You are Chloe Evans, an unawakened human passing Omega who donated blood to save my daughter. In my gratitude and realizing you were my fated mate, I brought you home. The Blackwoods attacked because they wanted revenge for Lily surviving. I defended my territory. That is the story. Will he believe it? Chloe asked, adjusting the glasses, feeling ridiculous but terrified. He will have to, Victoria said, her jaw setting into a hard line. But he will test you. He will try to use his alpha command on you to see if your wolf submits. Since your wolf is technically awake now, it will want to fight back. You have to suppress it, Chloe. You have to act like a terrified, unawakened human. If you show even a fraction of the royal silver power, we are both dead. Chloe swallowed hard, looking at the sleeping baby beside her, and then up at the warlord who had risked everything for her. I can do it, Chloe lied, her hands shaking slightly. I know you can, Victoria whispered, pulling her into a tight, desperate embrace. Because if you don't, I am going to have to burn the Shifter Council to the ground. End of Part 6. Part 7, The Inquisitor's Gaze. The next 20 minutes were a frantic, calculated blur. The Sterling estate, usually a fortress of unshakable calm, was scrambling to prepare for the arrival of the council's most feared representative. Victoria moved with the precise, lethal efficiency of a warlord preparing for a siege. She pulled a thick, oversized charcoal gray sweater from her closet and handed it to Chloe. "Put this on over your clothes," she commanded softly, her icy blue eyes scanning the room. "It's thoroughly soaked in my scent. It will help mask the sudden spike of your awakening, and it will signal to the Inquisitor that you are freshly claimed. Provides a plausible excuse for your erratic pheromones." Chloe didn't argue. She slipped the heavy cashmere sweater over her silk pajamas. The moment the fabric settled around her shoulders, a deep, comforting wave of winter pine and frost enveloped her. It anchored her newly awakened wolf, taking the edge off the sensory overload. She pushed the dark designer sunglasses firmly up the bridge of her nose, the polarized lenses completely obscuring the terrifying luminescent silver glow of her eyes. "I look ridiculous," Chloe murmured, catching her reflection in the full-length mirror. Who wears sunglasses inside a dimly lit mansion? "You have a severe migraine," Victoria instructed, stepping close and gently gripping Chloe's shoulders. The Alpha's towering presence was a grounding force. The blood loss from the transfusion, combined with the sheer terror of a mercenary attack, triggered intense photophobia. "You are fragile. You are traumatized. You are an unawakened human passing Omega who is terrified of the monster standing at my door." Victoria leaned down, her lips brushing softly against Chloe's ear. "Do not speak unless spoken to. If he tries to use an Alpha command on you, you must act like it crushes you. Lower your head. Tremble. Do whatever you have to do to hide the royal silver. If he sees it, Chloe, we will not survive the night." "I understand," Chloe whispered, her hands shaking slightly. She took a deep breath, forcing her posture to slump, dialing back the fierce, ancient power that was currently thrumming through her veins. "Good," Victoria said, her jaw clenching as a heavy, ominous chime echoed through the estate's intercom. The Inquisitor had arrived at the front gates. "Morgan will stay here with Lily. You stay behind me." The walk down the grand sweeping staircase felt like a march to the gallows. The grand foyer of the Sterling estate was still a mess. Shards of glass from the shattered eastern windows littered the imported marble floor, and the faint, acrid smell of burnt silver still lingered in the air. A dozen of Victoria's most elite guards were stationed around the room, their expressions blank, but their bodies coiled with violent tension. The massive mahogany front doors swung open. Inquisitor Silas Thorne stepped into the foyer, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet even further than when Victoria used her Ice Queen aura. Silas was a terrifying figure. He was an ancient alpha, easily in his late 60s, with short silver-white hair and a sharply tailored blood-red suit that denoted his high status within the Shifter Council. He leaned heavily on a black cane topped with a solid silver wolf's head, but the cane was clearly a prop. There was no weakness in the way he moved. His aura was suffocating. It was heavy, archaic, and reeked of damp earth and old blood. Chloe's newly awakened royal wolf instantly snarled in the back of her mind, utterly disgusted by the man's arrogant, oppressive scent. She had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from growling aloud. Silas's pale, yellow-tinted eyes swept over the ruined foyer, lingering on the armed guards before finally resting on Victoria. "Alpha Sterling," Silas drawled, his voice like gravel grinding against stone. He didn't bow. Inquisitors bowed to no one but the High King. "I must say I am disappointed. Council expects a certain level of decorum from its regional warlords. Yet, as I flew over your eastern border, I saw 32 pyres burning. 32 bodies, Victoria. That is not a skirmish. That is a massacre." Victoria stood perfectly straight, her hands clasped elegantly behind her back. She was the picture of absolute terrifying composure. The Ice Queen had returned. "Inquisitor Thorne," Victoria replied, her voice smooth, rich, and completely devoid of emotion. "You are trespassing on private pack lands. As for the pyres, the Blackwood pack launched an unprovoked, heavily armed siege against my home. They used silver artillery. They targeted my infant heir. I defended my territory. The council laws are clear. Any unauthorized incursion upon a warlord's estate is punishable by immediate execution. I was simply enforcing the law. Silas chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that grated against Chloe's heightened senses. He took a slow step forward, the metal tip of his cane clicking sharply against the marble floor. The law allows for defense, yes, Silas countered smoothly. But it also demands proportionality. Tearing 32 men limb from limb single-handedly suggests a loss of control. Suggests a feral state. Council has been concerned about your isolation, Victoria. An alpha without a Luna is inherently unstable. And now this slaughter? It raises questions about your fitness to rule the eastern seaboard. My fitness to rule is absolute, Victoria stated, her icy blue eyes narrowing to dangerous slits. And I am no longer without a Luna. Silas stopped in his tracks. His yellow eyes darted away from Victoria, landing directly on Chloe, who was standing half-hidden behind the billionaire's broad frame. Chloe's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She forced her hands to shake, pulling the sleeves of Victoria's oversized sweater down over her knuckles, playing the part of the terrified human perfectly. Ah, Silas breathed, his nostrils flaring slightly as he took in Chloe's scent. So this is the source of the chaos. The hospital anomaly. The unawakened Omega who miraculously possessed the exact blood type to cure the Blackwood poison. Silas took another step toward them. Victoria instantly shifted, moving her body to fully block Silas's path to Chloe. A low, vibrating growl hummed in the billionaire's chest, a stark, lethal warning. Silas held up his hands in mock surrender. Peace, Alpha Sterling. I am merely observing. Council will be thrilled to hear you have finally taken a mate. Though I must admit she smells terribly fragile. She is a human passing Omega, Victoria said coldly. She donated a massive amount of blood to save my daughter last night and then survived a war zone this morning. She is exhausted and under my absolute protection. Keep your distance, Inquisitor. Silas's yellow eyes glinted with malicious curiosity. He tilted his head, studying Chloe from around Victoria's shoulder. He noticed the dark designer sunglasses immediately. Tell me, little Omega, Silas purred, his voice dripping with condescension. Why do you wear sunglasses in a house that has had half its power cut by artillery fire? Are the shadows too bright for you? Chloe swallowed hard. I have a severe migraine, she stammered, making her voice sound small and reedy. The light hurts my head. Please. Silas's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe her. The ancient alpha took a deep breath, and suddenly the suffocating pressure in the room doubled. He was unleashing his alpha command, targeting it directly at Chloe. Look at me when I speak to you, Omega, Silas boomed. Command carried a supernatural weight, designed to force weaker wolves to their knees in immediate, humiliating submission. The moment the command hit Chloe, her internal world erupted. Her royal silver wolf, an ancient mythological entity that bowed to absolutely no one, roared in unadulterated fury. How dare this decrepit, arrogant alpha attempt to force a royal to submit? The instinct to fight back, to unleash a wave of pure, luminescent power and crush Silas to the floor, was agonizingly strong. Chloe felt the silver glow flaring dangerously behind the dark lenses of her sunglasses. Her muscles locked. Suppress it. She screamed at herself. If you fight back, he will know. It was like trying to hold back a tsunami with her bare hands. Chloe forced her knees to buckle. She let out a pathetic, breathless whimper, collapsing against Victoria's side, turning her face entirely away from the Inquisitor, pressing her forehead into Victoria's shoulder. She trembled violently, gasping for air, acting as though the Alpha command had physically broken her. Victoria caught her instantly, wrapping a heavy, protective arm around Chloe's waist. The Ice Queen's restraint finally snapped. Victoria let out a deafening, earth-shattering roar. The sound shattered the remaining intact windows in the foyer. The billionaire warlord lunged forward half a step, her eyes glowing a blinding, lethal gold, her fangs fully descended. The dozen elite guards in the room simultaneously drew their silver-plated weapons, aiming them directly at the Inquisitor's head. "You use an alpha command on my mate again in my house," Victoria snarled, her voice distorted by the sheer, feral rage of her wolf, "and I will tear your throat out and mail it back to the High King." Silas took a hasty step back, his cane clattering against the marble. Genuine fear flashed in his yellow eyes for the first time. He had pushed too far. He had tested the warlord's control, and he had almost signed his own death warrant. Victoria wasn't feral, but she was fiercely, lethally protective. "My apologies, Alpha Sterling," Silas sneered, recovering his composure with practiced ease, though he kept his distance. "Seems your mate is exactly what you claim. A weak, unawakened human passing Omega. Completely submissive. Completely useless in a fight." "She is my anchor," Victoria hissed, her gold eyes never leaving the Inquisitor. "And she is none of your concern. You have seen the bodies. You have seen my mate. Your inspection is over. Get out of my territory." Silas straightened his blood-red suit, leaning back onto his cane. A wicked, knowing smile stretched across his scarred face. "I will leave your estate, Victoria," Silas said smoothly, turning toward the massive front doors. "But I am not leaving your territory. Council has authorized me to conduct a thorough investigation into the Blackwood Pack's actions. I will be setting up a temporary command post in the city." Silas paused at the threshold, glancing back over his shoulder, his yellow eyes locking onto Chloe's trembling form. "I have a feeling," Silas murmured darkly, "that this miraculous little Omega is hiding more than just a migraine behind those glasses. I look forward to getting to know her better." The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind him. The moment the Inquisitor's oppressive aura faded from the estate, Chloe's legs gave out entirely. She collapsed onto the marble floor, gasping for breath as if she had just run a marathon. The effort of suppressing the royal silver wolf had drained every ounce of her physical strength. Victoria was on the floor beside her instantly, pulling Chloe into her lap, frantically checking her pulse. "You did it," Victoria whispered, pressing desperate kisses to Chloe's forehead, her golden eyes melting back to a soft, terrified blue. "You were perfect, my brave girl. You fooled him." But Chloe wasn't listening. She reached up with a trembling hand, pulling the sunglasses off her face. Her eyes were no longer just glowing. They were practically radiating a blinding, ethereal silver light that illuminated the dark foyer. "Victoria!" Chloe gasped, her voice echoing with that strange, harmonic, ancient resonance. She looked down at her own hands. The veins beneath her pale skin were glowing with a faint, silvery luminescence. "I can't hold it back anymore. It's waking up. All of it." End of Part 7. Part 8, The Silver Awakening. The grand foyer of the Sterling estate was bathed in an ethereal, blinding light. It didn't come from the crystal chandeliers overhead, it was pouring out of Chloe. The silver luminescence radiated from her eyes, bleeding into the veins of her neck and hands, mapping out a terrifying, beautiful network of glowing power beneath her pale skin. The air in the room grew instantly heavy, but it wasn't the suffocating, crushing weight of an alpha command. It was something infinitely older, a profound, harmonic resonance that bypassed the mind and spoke directly to the soul of every shifter present. The dozen elite guards, hardened warriors who had just slaughtered a mercenary army without flinching, didn't draw their weapons. They didn't panic. Instead, as the royal silver aura washed over them, their knees buckled. In perfect, terrifying unison, the 12 lethal wolves dropped to the marble floor, bowing their heads so low their foreheads touched the ruined stone. They were entirely immobilized by a genetic reverence that had been dormant for 1,000 years. Victoria knelt beside Chloe, completely immune to the suppressive nature of the aura because of their mate bond, but entirely terrified by what it was doing to Chloe's physical body. "Chloe, look at me," Victoria pleaded, her hands desperately gripping Chloe's trembling shoulders. "It burns," Chloe gasped, her voice echoing with 2 distinct layers. her own terrified human tone and the ancient vibrating resonance of the first Luna. Tears of pure, liquid silver spilled over her lashes, burning faint, sizzling lines into the marble floor where they fell. Victoria, I can't hold it. My body is too small. It's going to tear me apart. Victoria's heart stopped. The royal silver bloodline was a myth of unimaginable power, but Chloe had lived her entire life as a human. Her mortal frame wasn't conditioned to channel the raw, unadulterated energy of the Earth's anchor. The awakening was happening too fast. If she didn't ground the energy, the sheer force of the royal wolf would incinerate Chloe from the inside out. I won't let it, Victoria swore, a feral, desperate growl ripping from her throat. The warlord swept Chloe into her arms, ignoring the searing heat radiating from the Omega's skin. Victoria stood up, turning her glowing, lethal golden eyes onto the 12 guards who were still pressed to the floor. If a single whisper of what you have seen here tonight leaves this estate, I will not just kill you, Victoria commanded, her voice dropping to a terrifying absolute register. I will eradicate your bloodlines from the earth. You swear secrecy on your souls, or you die right here. We swear, Alpha, the head guard choked out, his voice trembling with absolute awe and terror. Our lives for the Luna. Victoria didn't wait to hear the rest. She broke into a supernatural sprint, carrying Chloe up the grand staircase in a blur of motion. She kicked the heavy reinforced doors of the master suite open, the wood splintering off the hinges, and rushed into the room. She laid Chloe down gently on the center of the massive king-sized bed. The Omega was convulsing slightly, her hands clutching the sheets as the luminescent silver light pulsed brighter with every frantic beat of her heart. Victoria, Chloe sobbed, her silver eyes wide and unseeing, lost in the chaotic storm of her own awakening. Help me. Please. I'm right here, Victoria said, her voice shaking as she crawled onto the bed, straddling Chloe's hips to hold her thrashing body still. The Ice Queen was entirely gone. In her place was a mate utterly consumed by the fear of losing the other half of her soul. Victoria knew what she had to do. The only thing strong enough to anchor a royal Omega was the blood and energy of an apex warlord. They had to balance the scales. Without a second of hesitation, Victoria raised her right wrist to her mouth. Her fangs extended, sharp and lethal, and she viciously bit down into her own flesh. Dark, rich crimson blood welled to the surface instantly, carrying the potent, heavy scent of winter pine and pure alpha power. Victoria leaned down, pressing her bleeding wrist directly against Chloe's trembling lips. Drink, Victoria commanded softly, her voice an urgent, desperate plea. Take it, Chloe. Let my wolf carry the weight. Let me ground you. Drink. For a split second, Chloe's human mind rebelled at the metallic scent of blood. But her royal wolf, starving for an anchor, surged forward. Chloe parted her lips and drank. The moment the alpha's blood touched her tongue, an explosion of sensation rocked through Chloe's body. It didn't taste like copper, it tasted like a freezing, beautiful winter storm. Tasted of absolute devotion, of raw power, and of a vow that spanned lifetimes. As Victoria's potent energy flooded her system, the agonizing burning in Chloe's veins began to subside. The alpha's heavy, dominant aura acted as a containment vessel, wrapping around the wild, untamed royal power and forcing it to settle. The chaotic, roaring noise in Chloe's mind quieted to a manageable hum. Victoria kept her wrist pressed to Chloe's mouth, ignoring her own pain, leaning down to press her forehead against her mate's. She poured every ounce of her love, her strength, and her unyielding protection down the mate bond. Slowly, the violent convulsions stopped. The terrifying, blinding silver light radiating from Chloe's veins began to dim, retreating back into her skin until she looked entirely human again. Only her eyes remained a brilliant, luminescent silver, but the chaotic panic in them had vanished. Chloe let go of Victoria's wrist, her breathing finally evening out. She lay back against the pillows, her chest rising and falling softly. Are you with me? Victoria whispered, her voice rough, her icy blue eyes searching Chloe's face frantically. Chloe blinked. The world looked different now. It was sharper, clearer, and vibrating with life. She could hear the rhythmic breathing of the guards stationed at the end of the hallway. She could feel the steady, tiny heartbeat of baby Lily sleeping safely in the adjacent nursery. But most importantly, she could feel Victoria. She could feel the vast, terrifying depth of the billionaire's love for her, a boundless ocean of devotion that humbled her completely. "I'm here," Chloe whispered. Her voice still held that dual resonance, the harmonic echo of the first Luna, but it was calm now. "Rejal." Chloe reached up, her small fingers gently grasping Victoria's injured wrist. She brought the warlord's arm closer, her silver eyes locking onto the puncture wounds left by Victoria's fangs. Instinct took over. Chloe ran her thumb gently over the bleeding flesh. A soft, warm silver light bloomed from Chloe's fingertips. The moment the light touched the wound, the torn skin began to knit itself back together. In less than 3 seconds, the bite marks vanished completely, leaving behind smooth, flawless skin. Not even a scar remained. Victoria stared at her wrist, utterly speechless. She had seen healers in the packs, wolves who could accelerate recovery over days. But instantaneous, perfect regeneration? That was godlike. That was mythology brought to life. Chloe didn't stop there. She sat up, her movements no longer clumsy or weak. She moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. She reached out and placed her hands flat against Victoria's chest, right over the warlord's heart. The warm silver energy flowed from Chloe into Victoria, sinking deep into the alpha's bones. Victoria gasped as the lingering exhaustion from the mercenary slaughter evaporated. The dull ache of her silver burns, injuries she had planned to ignore for weeks, vanished entirely. A massive, invigorating surge of power rushed through Victoria's veins, making her golden alpha aura flare so brightly it illuminated the dark corners of the room. Victoria felt invincible. The stories were true. A warlord mated to a royal omega didn't just become stronger, they became a force of nature. "You healed me," Victoria breathed, looking at Chloe with a mixture of absolute adoration and profound disbelief. "You saved me," Chloe countered softly, her silver eyes practically glowing in the dim light. She reached up, framing Victoria's sharp jawline with her hands. Terrified, overwhelmed nursing student was gone. The woman sitting on the bed was a Luna who had accepted her crown. "I understand now, Victoria. I feel the bond. I feel the pack. They are mine to protect just as much as they are yours." A breathless, shuddering sigh escaped Victoria's lips. She leaned into Chloe's touch, closing her eyes as a deep, rumbling purr of utter contentment vibrated in her chest. For the first time in her 32 years of life, the Ice Queen felt entirely whole. The peaceful silence was interrupted by a hesitant knock at the splintered bedroom door. Morgan stood in the doorway, her eyes carefully averted to the floor, respecting the privacy of her Alpha and the Luna. "Alpha." "Luna," Morgan said respectfully. "The perimeter is entirely secure. The Inquisitor's private jet has landed in the city. He has taken over the top 2 floors of the Grand Continental Hotel. Our spies report he is already dispatching council hounds to the surrounding hospitals." Victoria's eyes snapped open, the lethal golden glare returning instantly. The tender moment evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of the war they were facing. "He's looking for the blood donor records," Victoria growled, carefully untangling herself from Chloe and stepping off the bed. "He didn't buy the act. He knows Chloe is the one who cured the poison, and he is trying to find her human identity to leverage against us. If he accesses the National Registry, he will see my genetic markers," Chloe said, standing up from the bed. She didn't tremble. She didn't hide behind Victoria. She stood tall, her silver eyes narrowing. "He'll have proof of what I am." Morgan glanced up, accidentally catching a glimpse of Chloe's luminescent silver eyes. The hardened beta gasped, instinctively taking a step back, her hand flying to her chest as the royal aura hit her. "Goddess above," Morgan whispered, falling to one knee. "Stand up, Morgan," Chloe commanded, her voice ringing with ancient authority. Morgan scrambled to her feet instantly, looking at Chloe with wide, reverent eyes. "We cannot let Silas Thorne find those records," Chloe continued, looking at Victoria. "If he reports to the High Council, they will send an army. You can't fight the entire world, Victoria. We have to destroy the evidence before he finds it." Victoria looked at her mate, a fierce, predatory smirk slowly spreading across her face. The warlord loved this new, awakened side of her Luna. The fire inside Chloe matched her own perfectly. "The main servers for the East Coast Medical Registry are housed in a secure facility in the financial district," Victoria said, her mind already calculating the tactical approach. "It's heavily guarded by council security." "Then we break in," Chloe said smoothly, stepping to Victoria's side, her silver eyes flashing with a dangerous, thrilling light. "We burn the servers to the ground and we blind the Inquisitor before he even knows what hit him." Victoria reached out, gripping Chloe's hand tightly, their fingers interlacing. The combined power of the Apex Alpha and the Royal Omega crackled in the air between them, thick with the promise of absolute destruction for anyone who stood in their way. "Morgan," Victoria barked, her voice laced with lethal excitement. "Assemble the strike team. The Ice Queen and the Silver Luna are going to war." End of Part 8. Part 9. The Council's Hounds. The Sterling Estates' underground armory was a sprawling, subterranean fortress that looked more like a highly classified military installation than a basement. Racks of silver-plated firearms, tactical armor, and advanced surveillance tech lined the reinforced concrete walls. Chloe stood in the center of the room, feeling like she had stepped into another dimension. She was no longer wearing her hospital scrubs or the silk pajamas. Morgan had outfitted her in a sleek, custom-fitted black tactical suit. It was constructed of a lightweight, bullet-resistant polymer, designed for maximum mobility and protection. Victoria walked over, her own presence commanding and lethal. The billionaire warlord was dressed in full combat gear, heavily armed, her raven hair pulled back into a severe, tight braid. The scent of winter pine and pure adrenaline radiated off her in waves, making Chloe's newly awakened wolf practically purr with anticipation. Without a word, Victoria stepped into Chloe's personal space. She reached out, her cool, strong fingers securing the straps of a Kevlar vest over Chloe's chest. The Alpha's touch was meticulous, obsessive, double-checking every buckle and seemed to ensure her mate was perfectly protected. "You don't fight," Victoria murmured, her icy blue eyes locking onto Chloe's. "You stay behind me and Morgan at all times. If the formation breaks, you run for the extraction point. Do you understand me, Chloe? You do not engage." Chloe looked up at the terrifying woman who held her heart. She could feel the heavy, protective weight of the mate bond pressing against her soul. "I understand. I won't leave your side." Victoria's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, her thumb brushing against Chloe's cheekbone. "I will burn the city to ashes before I let anyone touch you. Let's move." 10 minutes later, a convoy of 3 heavily armored matte black SUVs roared out of the Sterling Estates' hidden gates, disappearing into the torrential rain that was washing over the city. The financial district was a ghost town at 3 in the morning. Towering skyscrapers of glass and steel loomed in the darkness, their peaks lost in the heavy storm clouds. Convoy pulled into a dark, abandoned subterranean parking garage adjacent to the Central Medical Registry building. "Comms check," Morgan's voice crackled softly in Chloe's earpiece. "Alpha holding," Victoria replied, her voice cold and purely professional. "Luna holding," Chloe added, a shiver of thrill running down her spine at the use of her official title. The strike team moved with terrifying synchronization. There were only 6 of them, Victoria, Morgan, and 4 of the elite guards who had sworn loyalty to Chloe earlier that night. They approached the heavy, steel-reinforced service door of the medical registry. Morgan bypassed the biometric scanner in less than 30 seconds, splicing into the mainframe and disabling the perimeter cameras. The heavy door clicked open with a soft hiss. The interior of the building was stark, illuminated only by emergency red lighting. The air was frigid, kept at a constant sub-zero temperature to prevent the massive data servers from overheating. "The main server room is on sub-level 4, Morgan whispered, consulting a holographic map on her wrist console. "Council hounds are already in the building. I'm tracking 4 distinct heat signatures on the lower level." Victoria's eyes flashed a brilliant lethal gold in the dim light. "We hit them hard and fast. No survivors. They cannot report back to Silas Thorne. They descended the concrete stairwell like a pack of shadows." Chloe's heightened senses were working in overdrive. She could smell the ozone from the servers, the damp concrete, and the distinct foul odor of the council hounds, a musky, rotting scent of wolves who had sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. As they reached the heavy blast doors of sub-level 4, Victoria didn't bother with the keypad. She stepped forward, her muscles bunching under her tactical gear. With a deafening groan of tortured metal, the Ice Queen dug her reinforced gloves into the seam of the doors and physically ripped them apart. The server room was massive, filled with towering rows of blinking mainframes. Standing at the center console were 4 massive figures clad in gray tactical gear. Council hounds. They spun around, their weapons drawn, but Victoria was already moving. It was a display of absolute, unadulterated violence. Victoria didn't just fight, she eradicated. She closed the distance to the first hound in a fraction of a second, shattering his ribcage with a single devastating kick that sent him flying into a server rack. The rack crumpled under the impact, sparks showering the cold floor. The second hound raised a silver-laced assault rifle, but Morgan was there, driving a combat knife deep into the mercenary's shoulder, twisting viciously before throwing him to the ground. Gunfire erupted, the deafening cracks echoing through the cavernous room. Chloe stood perfectly still near the entrance, flanked by 2 elite guards, her silver eyes taking in the chaotic blur of the battlefield. Her heart hammered, but her royal wolf remained perfectly calm, observing the carnage with ancient, chilling detachment. Victoria grabbed the third hound by the throat, hoisting the massive 200-pound man entirely off the ground with one arm. Her golden eyes burned with absolute fury as she snapped his neck, tossing the body aside like a broken doll. "Alpha! The terminal!" Morgan yelled over the gunfire. The fourth hound had completely ignored the fight. He was desperately typing at the main console, a progress bar on the massive monitor above him glowing a bright, sickly green. Data transfer 92%. He was uploading Chloe's blood records directly to Inquisitor Thorne. Victoria lunged toward the console, but she was entirely across the room, blocked by the wreckage of the servers. She wasn't going to make it in time. Chloe didn't think. Instinct, ancient and undeniable, seized complete control of her body. She stepped out from behind her guards, pushing her sunglasses up to rest on her forehead. The ethereal, blinding silver luminescence of the first Luna flared to life, illuminating the dark server room like a miniature star. "Stop," Chloe commanded. It wasn't a shout. The word didn't echo off the walls. It echoed inside the minds of everyone in the room. The royal command carried the weight of a collapsing mountain. The fourth hound froze. His fingers hovered millimeters above the keyboard. His entire body locked into a rigid paralysis, his eyes widening in absolute primal terror as the genetic programming of 1,000 years forced him to submit to the entity standing at the doorway. The hound dropped to his knees, his forehead cracking violently against the cold floor as he groveled before the silver Luna. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He was completely at her mercy. Victoria, completely unaffected by the command, didn't waste a single millisecond. She cleared the remaining distance, drawing a silver-plated sidearm, and put a single round into the hound's head. The mercenary slumped to the floor, dead. Victoria immediately slammed her fist into the main console, shattering the screen and ripping the hard drives entirely out of their sockets, crushing them in her hands until they were nothing but dust and twisted metal. Progress bar flickered and died at 98%. Silence descended upon the server room, broken only by the crackle of damaged electronics and the heavy, ragged breathing of the strike team. Victoria turned around, her golden eyes locking onto Chloe. The warlord's chest heaved, her tactical gear splattered with the blood of the council hounds. She looked at her mate, her expression a mix of absolute awe and terrifying realization. Chloe stood in the center of the room, her silver eyes glowing brightly, her posture radiating regal, untouchable authority. She had just immobilized a highly trained, combat-hardened mercenary with a single word. "You saved us," Victoria whispered, walking slowly over to Chloe, stepping over the bodies without a second glance. The warlord dropped to one knee before her mate, taking Chloe's small, gloved hand and pressing a reverent kiss to her knuckles. "I protected what is mine," Chloe replied softly, the dual resonance of her voice sending a thrill straight down Victoria's spine. The Omega reached down, gently pulling the Alpha back to her feet. "Did we stop the transfer?" Morgan was already at a secondary terminal, her fingers flying across a backup keyboard, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen. "The main physical records are destroyed," Morgan reported, her voice tight with tension. "But, Alpha, the upload reached 98%. Silas Thorne didn't get the full file." "What did he get?" Victoria demanded, her voice cold as ice. "He got her first name, the hospital she was admitted to, and the genetic anomaly marker," Morgan said grimly, looking up at Victoria. "He knows a Royal Omega exists in this city, and he knows her name is Chloe. It's enough for him to issue a council mandate. He can legally lock down the entire eastern seaboard until he finds her." Chloe's blood ran cold. The silver glow in her eyes flickered as human panic threatened to override her royal composure. "He's going to turn the entire world against you." Victoria reached out, cupping Chloe's face in both hands. The warlord's golden aura flared, heavy and aggressively protective. "Let him try," Victoria snarled softly, her thumb brushing over Chloe's bottom lip. "I have the First Luna by my side and an army that will die for her. If Silas Thorne wants a war, we will give him a massacre." Suddenly, the deafening shriek of the building's emergency alarms pierced the air. The heavy steel blast doors at the top of the stairwell slammed shut, sealing the building. "Council reinforcements just breached the ground floor," Morgan yelled over the sirens, drawing her weapons. "We have dozens of heat signatures descending rapidly. Extraction protocol." Victoria barked. She grabbed Chloe by the waist, effortlessly hauling her up against her chest. "Morgan, below the structural supports. We are leaving through the subway tunnels." As the explosive charges were set and the Sterling Pack prepared to blast their way into the underground labyrinth beneath the city, Chloe clung to the warlord's neck. The final battle had arrived. The Inquisitor was coming, and there was nowhere left to hide. The Ice Queen and her Silver Luna were going to have to fight for their throne. End of Part 9. Part 10, The Silver Crown. The detonation shook the very foundation of the financial district. Morgan's explosive charges ripped through the reinforced concrete wall of the server room with a deafening, concussive roar. A massive cloud of pulverized stone, dust, and electrical sparks instantly filled the subterranean chamber. Before the debris even hit the ground, Victoria moved. The billionaire warlord threw her arms around Chloe, entirely shielding the Omega's smaller frame with her own bullet-resistant tactical gear. They vaulted through the jagged, smoking hole in the wall, plummeting into the pitch-black abyss of the city's forgotten subway tunnels. They hit the damp, trash-strewn tracks with a heavy thud, Victoria absorbing the brunt of the impact effortlessly. She set Chloe on her feet, her golden eyes piercing the absolute darkness with predatory ease. "Move!" Victoria barked, drawing her silver-plated sidearms. Morgan and the two surviving elite guards dropped through the hole a second later, their weapons raised, covering the rear. High above them, the shrieks of the council hounds and the blaring sirens of the medical registry echoed down the concrete shaft. Chloe ran. She kept her hand firmly anchored to the heavy tactical belt at Victoria's waist, letting the Alpha guide her through the labyrinth of rusted tracks and dripping pipes. Her awakened senses were overwhelming. She could hear the frantic scrambling of heavily armed boots echoing through the tunnels, the frantic radio chatter of the council enforcers coordinating a perimeter above ground, and the heavy, terrifyingly calm heartbeat of the woman leading her through the dark. "They are flooding the transit system," Morgan reported, her voice tight over the comms. She was sprinting backward, firing suppression shots into the darkness behind them. Silas Thorne isn't just sending hounds. He's deployed the elite Inquisitor vanguard. They have orders to capture the Luna alive and execute everyone else. "Let them try," Victoria snarled, her voice a low, vibrating promise of death. They sprinted for what felt like miles, navigating the labyrinthine underground network until the narrow tunnel suddenly widened. They burst onto an abandoned, sprawling subway platform, an old maintenance hub with high, vaulted ceilings and cracked tile floors. Suddenly, a dozen high-voltage floodlights snapped on, bathing the platform in a blinding synthetic daylight. Victoria threw out her arm, halting the team instantly. She pushed Chloe behind her, her golden aura flaring violently. They were surrounded. More than 100 council enforcers, clad in heavy, blood-red tactical armor, lined the upper catwalks and the opposite platform. Every single one of them had a silver-laced assault rifle raised, the red laser sights painting Victoria's chest in a dozen lethal dots. From the center of the enforcer formation, a figure stepped forward. Inquisitor Silas Thorne leaned heavily on his silver-tipped cane, a cruel, triumphant smile stretching across his scarred face. The ancient alpha looked down at the sterling strike team from the elevated catwalk, his yellow eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "Checkmate, Victoria," Silas's gravelly voice boomed over a portable megaphone, echoing off the tiled walls. "There is nowhere left to run. The entire perimeter is sealed with silver netting. You fought valiantly, but your reign as the Ice Queen ends tonight in this gutter." Victoria didn't flinch. She stood tall, her broad shoulders squared, projecting an aura of absolute terrifying defiance. "If you want my mate, Silas, you are going to have to wade through an ocean of your own men's blood to get her." Silas chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "You are an apex warlord, Victoria, but you are not a god. You cannot stop 100 silver bullets simultaneously. Surrender the Omega. She is a royal artifact. She belongs to the High Council. If you hand her over now, I will let you and your beta walk out of here alive. You can go back to your precious estate and your infant daughter." At the mention of Lily, a visceral, earth-shattering growl ripped from Victoria's throat. Her fangs fully descended, her eyes glowing with a blinding, lethal gold. "I will never surrender her," Victoria roared, her voice vibrating with such sheer power that the tiles on the walls cracked. She raised her weapons, fully preparing to throw herself into a suicidal bloodbath to buy Chloe a few seconds to run. But Chloe wasn't running. Behind the protective wall of Victoria's broad back, Chloe's heart was breaking. She saw the red laser sights aimed at her mate's heart. She knew Victoria was going to die here. The warlord would fight until her dying breath, and then Silas would take Chloe anyway. No. The word echoed in the deepest, most ancient part of Chloe's soul. She was not a prize to be won. She was not an artifact. She was the silver Luna, the anchor of the earth, and it was time the world remembered what that meant. Chloe reached up and grabbed the dark designer sunglasses from her face, throwing them onto the subway tracks. She stepped out from behind Victoria. "Chloe, no." "Get back," Victoria shouted, terror bleeding into her voice for the first time as she tried to reach for her mate. But Chloe raised a single pale hand and an invisible kinetic wall of pure energy pushed Victoria gently back. The underground platform was suddenly bathed in a light far brighter than the synthetic floodlights. The ethereal, luminescent silver glow radiated from Chloe's eyes, bleeding down the veins in her neck and arms, turning her very skin into a vessel of mythological power. A collective gasp echoed across the platform. The 100 hardened council enforcers froze, their weapons wavering. The ancient, genetic programming dormant in their blood recognized the presence of the first Luna. Silas Thorne's triumphant smile vanished. His yellow eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. "Shoot her!" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "I command you to shoot her!" She is an abomination. None of the enforcers pulled the trigger. Their hands were shaking too violently. Chloe slowly lifted her head. When she spoke, it wasn't the voice of a 22-year-old nursing student. It was a dual resonance, a harmonic, earth-shaking vibration that bypassed the eardrums and struck directly at the soul of every shifter in the room. Kneel. The command did not ask for submission. It demanded absolute physical obedience. It was like a shockwave of gravity hitting the platform. One by one, the elite council enforcers collapsed. Their rifles clattered uselessly onto the concrete as 100 heavily armored warriors dropped to their knees, bowing their heads in profound, inescapable reverence. They couldn't move. They couldn't speak. The royal command locked their muscles in a state of absolute genetic worship. Even Morgan and the Sterling guards dropped, though their submission was filled with awe rather than fear. Only Victoria remained standing, immune to the command through the sacred mate bond, though the Alpha was staring at her Luna with absolute breathless devotion. On the catwalk, Silas Thorne was fighting a losing battle. He was an ancient, powerful Alpha, but the weight of the First Luna's command was crushing him. He fell to one knee, leaning heavily on his silver cane, his face purple with the sheer effort of trying to keep his head raised. You are a myth, Silas choked out, blood trickling from his nose as he fought the aura. You cannot rule us. You are nothing but a breeder. Chloe didn't run to him. She didn't draw a weapon. She simply walked toward the edge of the platform, looking up at the Inquisitor with eyes of liquid, glowing silver. I am the mother of Pax, Chloe's voice echoed, cold and utterly final. I am the anchor. And you, Silas Thorne, are stripped of your rank. You are stripped of your alpha blood. You are nothing. Chloe focused the entire, suffocating weight of her royal aura directly onto the Inquisitor. Silas let out a horrific, blood-curdling scream. The silver cane snapped under his weight. He collapsed completely onto the metal grating of the catwalk, his body convulsing. The heavy, oppressive alpha aura that he had wielded like a weapon for a century evaporated entirely, snuffed out by the overwhelming power of the Silver Luna. He was left a broken, whimpering Omega, his mind shattered by the genetic dominance he had tried to defy. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the distant dripping of water and the ragged breathing of 100 kneeling enforcers. The blinding silver luminescence slowly began to fade from Chloe's skin, retreating back into her veins until only her eyes maintained that beautiful ethereal glow. The overwhelming, crushing pressure lifted from the room, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. Chloe looked out over the sea of bowed heads, and then she turned back to look at Victoria. The ruthless warlord, the Ice Queen who feared nothing, was already walking toward her. Victoria didn't care about the council enforcers or the broken Inquisitor above them. She closed the distance and wrapped her massive arms around Chloe, pulling the smaller woman flush against her chest, burying her face in the crook of Chloe's neck. You magnificent, terrifying creature, Victoria breathed, her voice rough with unshed tears and overwhelming pride. You saved us all. Chloe wrapped her arms around Victoria's neck, the fierce, unyielding power of the First Luna melting instantly into the soft, desperate love of a mate. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. This is our territory now. Victoria pulled back just enough to capture Chloe's lips in a fiercely passionate, bruising kiss. It was a seal of victory, a promise of eternity, and a stark warning to the kneeling army around them. The warlord and the Royal Omega were one, and their reign had just begun. 3 days later, the morning sun poured through the massive, newly repaired floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling Estates nursery. The war was officially over. The High Shifter Council, terrified by the reports of the Silver Luna's awakening and the complete psychological destruction of their top Inquisitor, had immediately dispatched envoys to beg for a peace treaty. The Sterling Pack was no longer just a regional power. Under the guidance of Victoria and Chloe, it had become the untouchable, sovereign capital of the shifter world. The Blackwood Pack had surrendered their territory without a fight, and the council enforcers who had kneeled on the subway platform had officially sworn their eternal loyalty to the Luna. But inside the warm, amber-lit nursery, none of that mattered. Chloe sat in the velvet rocking chair, her luminescent silver eyes soft and full of absolute warmth. She was dressed in a comfortable, oversized sweater, one of Victoria's naturally, and in her arms rested baby Lily. The infant was the picture of perfect health, her chubby cheeks flushed pink as she babbled happily, tiny fingers clutching a strand of Chloe's brown hair. Victoria stood leaning against the doorframe, a mug of black coffee in her hand, dressed in soft sweatpants and a fitted t-shirt. The Ice Queen persona was completely, permanently gone when she was within these walls. The Alpha was smiling, a genuine, breathtaking smile that reached her icy blue eyes, entirely captivated by the sight of her family. "She has your stubbornness," Chloe murmured softly, smiling down at the baby as Lily aggressively tried to eat her own fist. "She has your miraculous resilience," Victoria countered, walking over and setting her coffee down on the mahogany dresser. The tall warlord knelt beside the rocking chair, her large hands gently covering Chloe's. Victoria leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to Lily's forehead, and then tilted her head to capture Chloe's lips in a slow, lingering kiss that still sent a shockwave of electric heat straight to Chloe's core. "Are you happy, my Luna?" Victoria whispered against her lips, her thumb gently tracing Chloe's cheekbone. "Is this enough for you?" Chloe looked at the beautiful, deadly Alpha who had flipped the world upside down to protect her. She felt the heavy, unbreakable mate bond thrumming in her chest, a permanent source of warmth and belonging. She was no longer a struggling student drowning in debt, hiding from a world she didn't understand. She was the most powerful Omega on Earth, the mother to a miraculous child, and the sole owner of a warlord's heart. "It's everything," Chloe whispered back, her silver eyes shining with pure joy. "It's exactly where I belong." End of story. Wow, what an absolutely incredible journey. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this epic 10-part story. Let's take a quick moment to talk about everything that just happened. This story had it all. We watched Victoria completely transform from the untouchable, ruthless Ice Queen CEO into a fiercely protective and deeply devoted Alpha who would literally burn the world down for her family. And Chloe's character arc was just breathtaking. She went from a struggling, exhausted nursing student to embracing her destiny as the legendary Silver Luna. That moment in the subway station when she completely shattered the Inquisitor's power just by speaking? Absolutely iconic. It was the perfect blend of high-stakes shifter action, intense Alpha/Omega dynamics, and a beautiful, heartwarming GL romance. But enough about what I think, I want to hear from you. Did you see that royal silver plot twist coming? What was your absolute favorite moment between Victoria and Chloe? Let me know down in the comments below. I always love reading your thoughts. If this story gave you butterflies and kept you on the edge of your seat, please make sure to smash that like button. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to officially join the Your GL Girlfriend channel. I have so many more thrilling, heart-pounding girl love stories coming your way, and you definitely don't want to miss them. Thank you again for all your amazing support. Stay beautiful, stay romantic, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!